Alright, we will be assembling a carburetor for a Suzuki LT125, and this carburetor was removed and soaked in cleaner, and then we're going to put it back together. So first thing we're going to do is get all the components together, the bowl together, put the float in, all the jets. So we've got your pilot jet here, and this is going to be a small jet. You're going to want to make sure that you can see through it before you put it together. So hold it up to light, and then that's going to go right down beside the main jet, which is here. This is the main jet, and this is going to be the bigger one. This will be from quarter throttle to full throttle. This is where the fuel will dump through, and we will put these both in using a flathead screwdriver. You will tighten those up, and they're brass jets, so you don't have to really tighten them down a whole lot. You want to make sure they're snug though. So we'll get those put in. Next thing we'll do is put the needle in. Now these needles are one of the more common things to wear out on a carburetor, and that is this piece right here. And you can see here on the very tip, those can wear out, and those will cause a ring around there where it sits into the carburetor. So you want to make sure that that is not grooved. When you do replace these, you'll replace the seat at the same time. So the needle and seat, which is here. And to replace the seat, you just pull that Phillips head screw and pull this seat out and put a new one in. So this one though is good. And what we will do is put this float, here's your float here, set this down, and then your float will sit down on top of it. And then we will take the pin and put the pin through this way. Now taking it apart, you want to make sure that you're very careful about how you push it out of there. If it is not coming out, you could use a pick, but you don't want to put a lot of pressure on these posts here. They're known to break. They're aluminum, and they can break very easily. So that's the bottom of the carburetor. Now we're ready for the bowl part of it. This has all been cleaned out and ready to go back together. So make sure everything is lined up here. Make sure this gasket is set down in there and is going to seat properly, and put that on. And you have 4 Phillips screws that will hold this bowl on. And again, you tighten these down. You don't have to tighten them very tight. Just make sure they're in there. Now, if your carburetor is leaking fuel, more than likely what is happening is that float is worn, or that needle is worn with that needle and seat, and the fuel is coming out this tab here, and you can adjust that float, or you can replace that needle and seat. Sometimes you can't adjust that float enough though, and that needle and seat just worn, and that's the only thing that you can do. So we'll tighten these Phillips up. We will flip the carburetor on its side, put in the pilot or the idle screw, as well as the air fuel screw. So we've got your pilot screw here, your idle screw here with a spring, and notice that O-ring on there. You want to make sure that that is in good condition, and this idle screw will just screw in there. Now this will push on the slide, push up and down on the slide, so you kind of just got to start that before you until you put the slide in there to know how far to go with that. Next thing will be the air fuel screw, and that spring is down in there. This spring will just, or this screw here will go down in here, and then this is the screw that is adjusted by turns out. So you want to go all the way in, and then hopefully we paid attention to how it went in there, or when you're pulling it out. Every time you want to count how many screws all the way seated is, and then you want to back it out. So in this case, this one was 2.5 turns out, which is generally the case. Between 1.5 and 3 is generally the case. So you seat it all the way, you turn it out, and I do it by half. So half, 1, half, 2, half. That's 2.5 screws out. Okay, now the next thing we're gonna do is put the slide in. And there's a needle here, and this can be adjusted if need be. If this needle needs adjusted, there's the pin there to do that. Sit that down in there. And then there's a plate that sits on top of that so that needle doesn't slide out. And then this slide will go down. And you want to make sure when you're doing that, that needle goes straight down into that and seats in that carburetor. Now, spring goes in there, cap goes on top. And then this is aluminum still, so make sure, a lot of times what I'll do is spin it backwards till you know it's in the right spot, and then turn it on. That way you're not cross-threading it. And that'll spin on there. Now, last thing we have to do is the choke. Now you want to make sure this is pulled out all the way. You can set your plunger down in there. Set your spring. And then you put your cap. Now when you put it on your four-wheeler, you're going to have a cable that's going to run through there. So you're going to have to be dealing with a cable. But you do it the same way. You just have one more step there. So put the cap on. And there is your complete carburetor. You're going to make sure that that slides up and down. To adjust the idle screw, you turn that, and that'll push that slide up, allowing more air and fuel through. So this is your air fuel screw here. If it's not running quite right, you may have to adjust that a little bit. That is a carburetor on a Suzuki LT125.